A wild Star Trek theory solves William Shatner's Kirk return and another franchise problem in one go. Star Trek can resolve two lingering issues in one go by bringing back William Shatner as James T. Kirk, but not as we know him. Plenty of familiar faces have made the voyage home to Star Trek over the past 20 years, from Leonard Nimoy's Spock creating a bridge between the old and new in 2009's Star Trek reboot to the cast of The Next Generation reuniting in Star Trek Picard Season 3. Conspicuous by his absence has been William Shatner, who has yet to reprise his iconic role as James T. Kirk in any official Star Trek movie or TV show since his character died at the end of 1994's Star Trek Generations. Kirk's death does pose somewhat of a stumbling block to any potential return for Shatner. Fortunately, the wonderful world of Star Trek harbors many mechanisms and methods via which dead characters can resurface, and Shatner himself has teased his long-awaited Star Trek comeback coming sooner rather than later. The real question is how best to make that happen. William Shatner could play the future version of Chris Pine's Kirk in Star Trek IV. One way William Shatner could slip back into the guise of James T. Kirk for a final time is as the future version of Chris Pine's Kirk from the Kelvin timeline in the upcoming Star Trek IV movie. Immediately, this route brings several major benefits. Chief among them, Star Trek would avoid having to reconcile Shatner's latest appearance with Kirk's death in Generations. Playing the Kelvin timeline Kirk would completely negate the need for retcons, nexus shenanigans, paradoxes, or any other sci-fi get-out-of-the-afterlife-free card. Star Trek IV's story could essentially frame itself as the older Kirk recounting a thrilling adventure from his past. The casting would make canonical sense too. The Kelvin timeline altered Star Trek's history, but didn't alter the actual biology of the main characters. Watching Star Trek's 3 Kelvin timeline movies, audiences are supposed to believe that the younger versions of Kirk and Spock look the same as their counterparts in the Prime timeline used to. When Zachary Quinto stands opposite Leonard Nimoy in Star Trek 2009, the former is intended to represent what Nimoy's youthful Spock looked like prior to the original series, and the same goes for Pine and Shatner. The concept of a 93-year-old Shatner portraying Pine's Kirk in his twilight years checks out logically then, but it also works from a thematic standpoint. If Star Trek IV does ever happen, it will almost certainly be the last entry for the Kelvin cast, given how much the project has struggled over the past 9 years since Star Trek Beyond. Just as Leonard Nimoy's Spock was there at the genesis of the Kelvin movie series, William Shatner's Kirk can be there at the end, creating a poignant full-circle moment. The Star Trek franchise has never shied away from boldly going where no narrative has gone before, bending timelines, rewriting history, and pulling characters through temporal rifts like rabbits out of quantum hats. But for all the temporal trickery and multiversal mayhem, there remains a glaring unresolved dilemma that has haunted fans since 1994's Star Trek Generations, the untimely and arguably unworthy death of Captain James T. Kirk. William Shatner's iconic portrayal of Kirk deserves more than a lonely demise beneath a pile of rocks on Veridian 3. And while alternate versions of Kirk have since appeared most notably in the Kelvin timeline with Chris Pine, the Prime Universe Kirk story still feels incomplete. But what if a bold, slightly unhinged theory could not only bring Shatner's Kirk back, but also fix another long-standing issue within the Star Trek canon? The problem, Kirk's death and the legacy gap. When Captain Kirk died helping Jean-Luc Picard prevent the destruction of an entire star system, it was noble. But the execution, literally and narratively, felt off. The galaxy's most legendary captain went down with little fanfare and minimal impact on the larger Trek universe. His name is revered, yes, but his end feels dissonant with the scale of his legacy. Meanwhile, the franchise has wrestled with another strange absence, the fate of the Kelvin timeline. Launched with J.J. Abrams' 2009 reboot, this alternate reality offered a flashy reimagining of the original crew, but after Star Trek Beyond, the future of that timeline has been in limbo. Budget issues, cast departures, and shifting corporate priorities have left Pine's Kirk adrift in a parallel universe with no closure in sight. Which brings us to the theory. The wild theory, the temporal convergence rescue. What if William Shatner's Prime Kirk didn't actually die on Veridian 3? we know that Starfleet history is littered with paradoxes and time anomalies. The nexus itself, a temporal ribbon that offers those inside their heart's desire, already breaks every rule of causality. What if Kirk, upon entering the nexus, created more than just an echo of himself? What if the version who left with Picard was a projection, not the real Kirk? In other words, Prime Kirk never fully exited the nexus. His real consciousness, or a temporal duplicate, remains intact within that pocket dimension. Here's where it gets weird in a very Trek way. What if, during a future crisis in the 25th or 26th century, Starfleet encounters a devastating multiversal threat, something akin to the collapsing timeline seen in Star Trek, Picard Season 2, or even the galactic-scale anomalies hinted at in Discovery? With the fabric of time unraveling, a group of Starfleet officers, perhaps even Picard's successors or descendants, attempt to reach into the nexus in search of wisdom from legends past. They succeed, but instead of just finding an echo, they find a living, conscious Kirk. And here's the kicker, not only is Shatner's Kirk alive in the nexus, but so is a lost version of Chris Pine's Kirk from the Kelvin timeline. A Kirk meets Kirk event horizon. This is where the theory becomes more than just a Shatner resurrection fantasy. By linking the nexus to the Kelvin timeline, Star Trek could create a multiversal meeting of Kirks, one from the Prime Universe, one from the Kelvinverse, each confronting what it means to be the same man molded by different histories. They could explore questions of fate, legacy, and whether greatness is born or forged. Shatner's older, battle-worn Kirk could mentor the younger, more impulsive Pine version. Pine's Kirk could challenge the regrets and romanticized legacy of the Prime Kirk, offering a mirror to his alternate self's missed opportunities. And narratively, this crossover would finally allow Star Trek to resolve both Kirk's stories with meaning and weight, solving two problems with one nexus. Here's why this wild theory works. 1. It fixes Shatner's Kirk's ending. Bringing him back from the nexus allows Trek to give Kirk the send-off he deserves. Not just a rock pile on a forgotten world, but a legacy-defining arc that places him back at the center of the galaxy's fate. 2. It revives the Kelvin timeline. The fate of Pine's crew has been left unresolved for years. By tying it into the nexus and a multiverse-spanning crisis, Trek could give fans a satisfying closure, or even launch a new branch of stories like a limited series or final film. And imagine the marketing potential: Kirk versus Kirk, Shatner and Pine, legacy and rebirth. One final mission. A Trek-worthy ending. The idea of a Kirk resurrection may seem like fan fiction, but Star Trek has done stranger things. Spock was reborn through Genesis. Picard got a synthetic body. Data returned as a consciousness in Picard. Time travel, body swaps, and nexus duplicates are well within the franchise's established narrative toolkit. This story arc wouldn't just be nostalgia bait. It could become a thoughtful meditation on legacy, exploring how different generations face similar challenges, how leadership evolves, and how heroes endure even when the universe changes around them. Kirk has always represented a bold, passionate form of command. By bringing both his major versions together, the franchise could honor his spirit in full. It would be a way to canonically acknowledge that both portrayals matter and allow them to hand off the beating